Good evening and welcome to the March 21st, 2022 Williamson County School Board meeting. Board members, will you please record your attendance?
We have 11 board members present.
Thank you. Our next item is the Pledge of Allegiance, followed by a moment of silence. And with us tonight are Deputies Whitley and Mueller. Deputies, we'd be honored if you'd lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. We'll now address items of particular public interest during our public comment. Public comment is one of several ways that the board hears from constituents. Other avenues include emails, phone calls, and in-person meetings. Per board policy, 30 minutes will be placed on the agenda for the chair to recognize individuals to make comments. School board members do not respond to public comment during our meetings. Williamson County residents and employees shall have first priority. And in the event that time remains, the chair may allow non-residents to speak. All persons addressing the board will state his or her name, provide address, and that is provided via the sign-up process, and provide the name of the organization or group he or she represents before addressing the board. The board reserves the right to limit the time of any speaker, and the chair shall have the authority to terminate the remarks of any individual who is disruptive or does not adhere to a board rules. Just so everyone knows, we have 2 speakers signed up tonight. So speakers, you will have up to 3 minutes to speak. The school board does expect that each speaker will be courteous, modeling for our students respectful disagreement. Speakers will address their comments to the entire school board and not to an individual board member, the superintendent, staff member, or audience. Vulgar language is not permitted. No yelling, speaking, or clapping is allowed. And remarks of any individual who is disruptive or does not adhere to the rules shall be terminated by the chair. I will now call you up just one at a time since we only have 2 speakers. And again, you have 3 minutes to speak. Our board vice chair, Casey Haw. You can see he sits right over here at the very end. He's our timekeeper, and he will let you know when your time is up. So, Mr. Haw, I'm turning on your microphone at this time. If you would like to be escorted out to your car by a deputy, please approach one of the deputies and let them know, and they'll be happy to help you. So our first speaker tonight is Tori Kiefer.
Hi there, I'm Tori Kiefer. I live at 421 East Thompson Lane in Nashville. Most of you all know me as the reporter who used to cover schools for the last 3 years for the Williamson Herald, but now I'm here with One Generation Away. So I'm here to invite you all to our upcoming spring breakfast fundraiser on April 22nd in Brentwood. This is a free catered event, so you all can come and receive a meal and learn more about what we do. But for those of you who are not familiar with One Generation Away, we are a nonprofit focused on solving food insecurity in our community. We serve Williamson County as well as surrounding counties. We gave away 3.5 million meals last year. And we do this by rescuing food. This is surplus food from grocery stores, from restaurants and caterers, and we take that food and redistribute it to families who are in need of a little bit extra support. So you all know that we see this in our schools. We're in a very affluent community, and yet we're having kids who are receiving their school breakfast, their school lunches, and they go home on Friday night, and they are not able to get quite enough sustenance to live a healthy lifestyle through the weekend until Monday morning. And so we are able to stand in the gap for those families. And you guys are a great partner with us in what we do, and so we're very thankful for that, and we hope that you all will join us on April 22nd. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mallory Hampton.
Good evening. My name is Mallory Hampton. I'm a second-generation Williamson County teacher. I grew up right here in Franklin, attending grades K through 12 in Williamson County schools. I'm here tonight with the same concerns I've written in emails, hoping that my voice and my presence will spark some action. The median sales price in a home in this county is currently 16 times the average Williamson County teacher's salary. While I'm aware you can't control the housing market, it should no longer be philosophical standard nor justified for out-of-county employees to be required to pay tuition for their own children to attend the same free and public schools education that they provide. Last calendar year, 8.3% of my salary was taken out of my pocket because of this policy, an amount that far exceeds any other deduction. Why do we continue to financially penalize teachers who cannot afford to live in the county? We value the work that we do for these schools, and so I believe it should be professional courtesy to allow us to bring our own children without this financial penalty. In correspondence with Mr. Golden, he said this is not a significant revenue source for us. However, this is a significant expense on the teacher. Board members, I know that even if you voted to eliminate the policy, it could still be rejected by the county commission, but I'm asking you to fight to revise this policy so this money can be invested to where it truly is significant, our families. And I just want to say, because I have an extra couple seconds, not one teacher goes into the profession for the pay. We go into the profession because we have a passion for these children and to make a difference in their lives. In an 8-hour workday, we are not only a teacher, but we are a therapist, we are a social worker, we are a custodian, we're an entertainer, we're a cheerleader, we're a nurse, we're a mentor, and yet we still have to work at least one side job just to make additional time away from our families just to make ends meet. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes our public comment tonight. Now we'll move on to approval of tonight's agenda. Do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Mr. Welch makes the motion. Do I have a second? Mr. Brown makes the second. Board members, is there any discussion? If not, please cast your votes.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, board members. And moving on to the approval of the consent agenda, is there a motion to approve? Mr. Wimberly makes the motion and Ms. Cleveland makes the second. Any discussion, board members? I don't see any requests for discussion. Please cast your votes.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, board members. With that vote, you have approved the following items. Last month's school board meeting minutes, the following board policies for second reading, the policy on naming facilities, the policy on interference and disruption of school activities, and the policy on students receiving special education services. And then you have also approved the recommendation for field trip requests. Thank you, board members. Mr. Wimberly? Do you have? Okay, let me clear that for you, please. Okay. And then moving on, we'll now hear communications to the board, and we'll start with the superintendent's report. Mr. Golden.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I want to start with thanking the public speakers. One Way made a big difference in some of the efforts we were going through in providing food to families, especially over the last couple of years. So I want to thank them for that. Also, I appreciate the very professional comments of our teacher, and just reiterate what she mentioned, I had mentioned. From a budgeting standpoint, the revenue that we get from teacher tuition is not driving us. It is largely a county commission issue based on a standard that they've given. And I am going to talk a little bit about the budget related to that, but thank you for those comments as well. Y'all, I'm excited about this budget, and we talked about it at the work session. This is the most significant pay increase over the course of a year that we've been able to give our staff in the 16 years I've been here. When you combine the February, just last month, pay increase that we were able to give, plus the proposal we have in this budget, the two of those combined are, again, the most significant pay increase over the course of a year. And I don't know how long. And we've still got a ways to go. Of course, you guys will be reviewing this, and we have to go through the county commission process. But we have set this budget up based largely on two focus points I gave our staff. First, pay, and then second, mental health supports with additional people. And those were largely based on a couple of goals you set for me many months ago for this particular fiscal year. One, to provide a fiscally sound pay plan that addresses changing market conditions, and second, to help improve students' sense of safety. And there are elements of both in the budget. Not everything we're doing, but certainly elements of both. And to give everyone a quick review of what we talked about at our work session, but believe it or not, 10, 11 days ago already, Rachel Farmer presented to you a primer on the budget. And on the revenue side, we learned that there are three main sources of revenue for us. One is what's called the BEP, which is the state funding. That's about a third or so of our total funding for our budget. Second is the property tax rate that the county government sets. And third is sales tax. And the big variable for us is sales tax. And one of the reasons we were able to have a pay increase in the middle of the year is sales tax. Likewise, in the work that Ms. Farmer did in our budget projections, sales tax is the most significant variable because generally speaking, the others are fairly predictable. We really don't get good, clear numbers from the state till April. And because of our budgeting process, we don't have a firm grasp of what BEP is exactly going to look like, but we have some projections based on the governor's announcements. Property tax, the county commission has made it clear at many of our public meetings, they don't intend to increase the property tax rate this year. So we budgeted based on what we could afford this year. That's the revenue side. On the expense side, again, I mentioned those two key points that we made a focus. Pay based on the goal and additional people and services to address those mental health needs. And you'll find those in the budget. And you mentioned in your goal for me to address market conditions. And you may remember that we talked about the discussions we've been having with the WCEA, our Teachers Association, about teacher pay specifically. And our recommendation that's coming when we present our MOU, Memorandum of Understanding with the WCA, is going to increase those earlier years more than typical in pay. And it's because of the research we've done on the impacts on us with respect to teacher retention. And y'all, this is not just recruiting, it's about retention as well. Number one, we need to keep our teachers. Number two, we need to fill our spots. And I want you all to remember that that is our focus. So you may recall a couple of months ago, Ms. Hall, Vicki Hall, our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, presented some detail of where we lose teachers, generally speaking, where we recruit, what they leave for, and we've actually got that posted on our website from a meeting 2 months ago. Related to that, we saw and have historically found those earlier years of teaching is where we lose people. Ironically, last week, the TEA published a compilation of pay research they have done over the course of this year, comparing school districts to each other. They've gone through this process for many years. There's been a lull the last couple of years, but they published a lot of good data just last week. And one data point that they publish is a list of school districts ranked, 147 school districts in the state, based on starting pay. When we started this year, our starting pay was $40,150. That ranked Williamson County Schools as the 68th highest starting pay in the state. That reflects what we've experienced. So we have put our emphasis on those early years. But we haven't just done that. We gave a full 3% across the board to teachers last month. Every teacher pay line, every cell in our pay plan is going to have a significant increase. The discussion we've had with the WCA includes a minimum 2.9 pay increase, again, with an emphasis on the youngest years. We mentioned at the work session that we also have an emphasis on the later years as well, because of the nature of the role that we discuss, where teachers get additional pay based on their year's experience, and those teachers in those later years not getting the role. One of the things that we have found that has contributed to this is, historically, for many years, there's been a percentage pay increase. Percentage pay increase, percentage pay increase. Over time, if you give a percentage pay increase to a lower paying position compared to a higher paying position, what happens? The gap widens. This year's proposal that will be coming to you and is funded in this budget that you'll be voting on tonight includes an adjustment to address that gap that's been happening over the course of years. I think that's a key point for you to be thinking about. I will say also, we believe this is a conservative budget based on our projection of sales tax. It's possible that the sales tax revenue may come in ahead of projection, because the reality is we're 16, 17 months out from the months that are going to fund this budget. We know that it's not just about pay. It's not just about salaries. But that's the goal we have. That's what this budget is talking about tonight. We anticipate that over the course of the next year, we'll be having regular discussions about more issues related to competing in this market than the budget tonight. But what you're voting on tonight is that budget. So again, I want to tell you that I'm proud of where we are. I'm excited about this budget because it is the most significant increase that I've experienced. And it's for this year, what may be the last BEP year, because we all know from that discussion last Thursday and what we've been reading in news reports for months, the state is looking at a new funding plan for the next year. As we plan this budget, we know we're going to be under the state's plan, the existing plan this year. So with what we've got, with what we can afford, I'm excited about where we are. So, Madam Chair, that's my report for tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Golden. Next on the agenda are student, staff, and school spotlights with Carol Birdsong.
Ms. Garrett and board members, tonight we begin by celebrating our students who earned state championships, if you will, through the Tennessee High School Press Association. And we'll start with Brentwood High School. We had 11 students, or 11 winners, shall I say, in this competition. Best Commercial, Eliza Linney. Best News Package, Eliza Linney and Noah True. Best Sports Video, Courtney Stanley and Warren Kaufman. Best Sports Coverage of a Live Event, the WBHS 9 Football Crew. And the best overall television station, WBHS 9, from Brentwood High School, their teacher is Ron Adcock. Franklin High School, best videographer, Anna Ray Jones. Best TV reporter, Clay Tillman. Best video, Graham Wynn. Their teacher is Carrie Thompson. Best sports picture for a yearbook. This is Hooper, Katie Heathcock, and David Ross from Independence High School. Their yearbook sponsor is Laura Kim. For the first place in the best music video, this is Nat Finley from Independence High School. Her teacher is Matt Balzer. And the best public service announcement, Ryan Moody, Anna Laura Morales, and Simone Jones. Megan from Ravenwood, Megan Sanchez and Chelsea Kite. the teachers there. Now we're moving to athletics. We had 5 state champions in wrestling. The first girls state wrestling champion in the 138-pound category, Brooklyn Long from Independence High School. Alexander Villarreal is the coach. From Ravenwood High School, Kaylin Thomas, the winner in the 132-pound category. Gaston Gordon, her coach. Division I state champion in the 182-pound category, Jacob Clevenger from Fairview High School. James Derrick, the coach. And also from Fairview High School, Kendrick Curtis, who is our state champion in the 220-pound category. James Derrick, his coach. From Summit High School, Jarvis Little, state champion Division II 120-pound category. Pete Miller is his coach. We have a couple of staff spotlights as well. This is Katarina Bandy, who is our Tennessee Geographic Alliance Geography Teacher of the Year from Ravenwood High School. And also, this is Mandy Thompson, who is our Tennessee Department of Education Mid-Cumberland Regional Coordinator of the Year. Congratulations to all of our students and staff.
Thank you, Ms. Birdsong. Board members, I don't have anything to report tonight for our board chair report, so we'll move to our next items, which are new business items. And the first item under new business is the approval of the 2022-2023 school budget. And the first item is the general purpose school fund. Do we have a motion to approve? Mr. Mitchell makes the motion. Mr. Wimberly makes the second. Board members, any discussion? Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Oh, sorry, Elliot. Hold on just a second. Let me find you here. There you go.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to state that I, Elliot Mitchell, state I have a relative employed by the school system and certify that I will vote in the best interest of the school district.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I see no further requests for discussion on the general purpose school fund. Mr. Galbraith?
Yes. Thank you. So, Jason, I appreciate the some of your comments around what to do if we're able to get revenue in addition to what we have in the budget. We are much closer to closing the gap than we usually are at this point in the process. But I guess I just want to make sure that we set aside some time as a board over the coming months to talk about some priorities of what we would like to see happen if that were the case. I think it's a responsible budget at the same time as we're making some pretty significant investments in staff, but I think that we're not to where any of us want to be. I think that's probably a sign of a good budget is always to leave a little bit on the table, but I think we have there's some things that I know I want to focus on. I don't think tonight's the right place to do those. I know I've sent those to you, but I'll look forward to hopefully having some time allocated at our next work session to talk through some of those things.
Thank you for that. As we went through the budget process administratively, we cut about $2.5 million or so of requests that our department leaders brought to us. Also, on the teacher side and the staff side, my leadership team and I actually have a meeting with a small group of Chamber of Commerce leaders tomorrow to brainstorm how they've been handling the market condition changes, and try to share some best practices with them. So over the course of the next few months, there may be some particular ideas that we share from our business colleagues in this interesting market, and we'll make sure we have those conversations as well with the board.
Well, and I guess to the speaker's comment, I mean, I've completely changed my mind on, I think it probably has to do with the housing condition and the market conditions of housing. But I really would I'd love to understand where the board, where everybody falls on this. But, I mean, I think if we're going to continue to attract and retain teachers, then finding a way to work out something with the county commission to ease the burden of the tuition out of county is something that I'm prepared to do. I think it could be outside the budget. It could be an amendment, something that we work on between now and then. So I'm comfortable supporting the budget with that in there, with the understanding that we could make some modifications between now and then if we could come. I don't feel comfortable just kind of lobbing it over and making the commission respond to it. I don't think that's not the way they typically treat us, and I would not like to do that for them. But I think it's time. I mean, I came up with an idea on the fly, and I've thought through it a lot about some ways that we can lessen that burden and still offer the tuition, but have some kind of retention bonus that we could allow them to either defer payment or not at all. I'm open. I just want to have a discussion about it. I don't pretend to have all the answers, but if the board is willing to have that discussion, I think we should schedule that for next month. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Galbraith. Mr. Brown?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think very similar sentiments to what Jay was saying with respect to the first on the tuition issue. Do you have that number, Jason or Rachel, what that amounts to in terms of revenue, the actual dollar amount?
I have the per employee number, and I think Rachel was nodding her head and might have the aggregate. So the per employee number, and we actually have it structured based on a declining amount. The amount is $3,850 annually, and that's a family tuition rate, so we don't do it per child. That's in year one, and then our SOP drops that by 10% every year down to $770, which is, if I'm not mistaken, 20% of that $3,850 in the ninth year. That number has been flat at least the last 3 years. I have not increased that administratively. We've kept that flat, even though the cost has gone up. So in the aggregate, Rachel, if you would share what that means on the budget side.
You're ready.
It fluctuates a little bit, but between 300 and 360,000 is about where we normally fall.
Okay, thank you. I would echo Jay's point about if we could find a way offline to have that conversation with the county commission. I think we should, given that it's such a minimal amount. And I think it would mean a lot based on what we heard tonight and then what we've heard from others. The second comment or question really is about the pay increase. And if I've heard two things, I guess, in the last couple of months as we've been talking about this, it's number one, thank you. I hear that a lot. Thank you for what you've done. Thank you for the district stepping up and increasing the pay of our teachers and staff. But if I've heard a second thing, it's not enough. And almost in the same breath. So it's certainly not for lack of appreciation, but it just begs the question as to how are we going to tackle this? And I know we've talked about this at work session and we've had multiple conversations about it. I'm not ready to use Jay's terminology. I'm not ready to lob this at the county commission and make them have to deal with it, but I would like to suggest, and I'm not sure the best way to do this, that we make it known to the county commission that there might be interest in doing more than the 2% that's in the budget. And And I guess the question I would ask is what would an additional 1% raise and an incremental increase on the classified side mean from a dollar amount standpoint?
Thank you for asking that question, and giving us, you actually gave us a heads up that you were wondering about that. So I had estimated in our conversation close to 3.5, but actually Rachel did the math and it's a little bit less. Rachel, I'm speaking for you, it's like with our new positions, it's right at $3 million for 1% for everyone.
And that's just on the classified side, right?
No, that's
Or the
all
teacher side?
employees.
That's all employees?
All employees.
Okay, so 3 million, and then what are we estimating, and I know it's an estimate purely at this point, but our portion of the additional teacher teacher pay appropriation that Governor Lee's put forward, the 125 million?
So Rachel, if you would speak to that.
It's an estimate only, as you said, but what he's indicated would be based on the number of teachers. If that is the case, roughly $3 million could also be added through that.
And Rachel, if I'm not mistaken, you've included that in the revenue side of this budget that's before you right now, that projection from this.
I have
You
not,
have
but that
not?
was one of the
Okay, thank
areas
you.
where we thought we could close the gap, would be
Gotcha,
potentially
okay.
that additional funding.
So just for we've mentioned close the gap a couple of times, and Mr. Galbraith mentioned that. Right now, as we sit, if revenue stopped, we couldn't afford next year's budget. So it's based on our projections of the revenue over these next few months, and that's what she's referring to with closing the gap. And so largely, it depends on sales tax, because the property tax revenue comes in early in the budget year. BEP comes right now 4 times a year. I'm sorry. Okay, we're
But they
getting,
evaluate it 4 times a
thank
year.
you. They value us based on the number of students 4 times a year, but the monthly payments come in. So that's the gap we're talking about.
So maybe this is a question for Nancy or Jason, whoever wants to answer this. Procedurally, if we're going to ask the county commission to consider something, but we're not going to necessarily put it in the budget, what's historically the means by which we've done that? Because I'm looking at a situation here where we're saying a 1% additional pay would be $3 million. We're getting $3 million, we think, from the state. Essentially, that's a wash. Now, that doesn't deal with out years in terms of, it increases our base, and then we have to deal with that in the out years. But, and I recognize that, but how would we handle that from a procedural standpoint?
Procedurally, you would need to amend the budget because the county commission will vote on whatever this board sends to them.
So from a process standpoint, it's a little bit different this year compared to previous years just because of time. You may recall that county government talked about their discussions with the state auditors who asked them to pass the budget in June, and that's never happened before. So they have a responsibility to the state to pass all the budgets in June. So working back from that process, they actually start their discussions with us in early April. We have multiple meetings with different committees, Education Committee, Budget Committee, joint meetings with those committees before it ultimately goes to the county commission for vote in June. So Dana, if I understand what you're saying, at some point, and it really could happen at any point, either before or after the budget is passed, that we could present an amendment to the budget.
That is correct.
So as an example, we did it back in February, right? You all actually passed, if I'm not mistaken, actually in January, then the commission voted in February for a budget amendment to get that pay increase. It would be basically that structure.
So I guess my request would be that you guys take that under advisement, Jason, and at the next work session, board meeting, I maybe reserve the right to bring this back up and offer an amendment to the budget if we think that it's something that's at that point feasible and that you guys would be comfortable with.
I'll make sure, we will do that. I'll make sure I have a conversation with the mayor as well. Every year, county government sets standards for budget, and this year they set 2% as their standard after the spending 4% on that dollar an hour pay increase at the county government side. So we really have three entities that go through processes related to teacher pay. We talk with the WCA, you all vote, and then the county commission has to work through it. So that typically does take a lot of discussions.
You know, except for that point, I think the budget is really well done. I appreciate all the work that went into it, and thanks to you and the whole staff.
Mr. Priya?
I just had a follow-up question on that. I know you said that the budget that we have now was based on a pretty low-ball conservative estimate of sales tax revenue. So when do we find out if that goes way above the mark of what we're estimating?
So let me first give you a little bit more detail related to that. We're projecting a 10% increase in sales tax. The sales tax increase in the last few months has been well above that. But our historical sales tax increase has been at or below that 10%.
10% over what?
10% over the previous year. Thank you. So month to month, Rachel, I'm speaking for you, so I'm actually going to stop and I'm going to turn it over to Rachel to answer that question. Rachel, if you would.
You were headed in the right direction for sure. It is 10%. This time we used 10% over 2021 versus 21-22 because of the unusual market that's happened within the last year. So it would be a 10% increase over there. What we're still waiting on is what we've estimated for the rest of the year is a 17% increase, and that's what we're waiting to see as it comes in.
So if that came in, there's the potential that we could discuss another unprecedented mid-year raise after this is passed. So that's all. I just want to kind of put that out there so that I know, because I've heard from a lot of teachers as well that are excited about the raise, but are looking to see what else can be done. And I think it helps to have them have an understanding of when and how this can be done. And I think the biggest thing right now would be for community members, everyone who's really passionate about this, because I think all of us sitting here would love to give a huge raise to all of our teachers for all the work they do. But continue to talk in the community, but continue to talk to your county commissioners so that they understand the importance of this, and also advocate to state leaders, our local state leaders, because they're going to be voting on the TISA plan, and if that goes through, that's going to be a huge boost to our budget and could potentially lead to an even bigger pay raise. So just putting that out there. But yes, thank you for all the work you guys did on this budget. It's great.
Thank you for that. And you mentioned TISA, and it'll be interesting to see how that acronym shakes out. I don't know what to call it yet, TISA or TISA, but Tennessee Investment in Student Achievement is the acronym. And that's the legislation that is being proposed to take effect, not this coming fiscal year, but the next. And like we talked about at the work session, on paper, it looks pretty good to us. Now, the caveat in my mind is if it's fully funded, if it passes and if it's fully funded on an annual basis. That's going to be key because that's what we've been living with for the past 30 years with BEP, the struggle with fully funding it. But I think I mentioned that old phrase, cautiously optimistic about, at the work session about that. I believe that at the state level, a big portion of what they're thinking is they recognize they need to compete with other states for teachers because there are fewer teachers nationally. Those trends are down, and we're having to compete more and more. If this passes, I think that's got the potential to help, to make us more competitive so that we can recruit outside the state, and we won't be fighting with each other as local districts. That's next year. But you're right. That could make for a big change next year. I'm very much looking forward to seeing where we go with that. But for this year, with what BEP and the sales tax bring on, there's still that potential. Thank you for that.
Mr. Wimberly?
I was wondering why we don't amend or put a motion on the floor to amend the budget tonight. But I think Mr. Golden kind of answered that question. It's not as easy. We need to collaborate.
Thank you. You're right. We do need to collaborate. Also, we've based our projections on what we believe may happen in the market. And I'm not comfortable at this point making a recommendation for an expenditure that exceeds our projected revenue.
Okay, I got it. Thank you.
Mr. Hall.
Thank you, Chair. And kind of along those lines, Jason, I appreciate the work that you do each and every month with the County Commission in various meetings and discussions. We have a County Commission that's very supportive of our public schools. We have a County Mayor who's very supportive of our public schools, and really appreciate the guidance and collaboration that they provide. We present lean budgets, and it doesn't sound like that in the aggregate when you're talking about this, but so much of it is personnel. And if you're really talking about a budget based on people and serving the needs of the students and the communities, this is a great investment in our children and our future. It almost sounds trite to say that, but it literally is. And again, just appreciate the work that Ms. Farmer and Ms. Robbins and the team have done to get us to this point where I feel like in years past there's been a little more contentiousness with budget processes, but in recent years I think you've done an excellent job of setting it up so that there are no surprises. They know what we're working together to accomplish, and I'm sure they'll be amenable to future discussions about some of these other incentives that we've been talking about for the last few months.
Thank you for that. It takes a lot of conversations, and it's never perfect, and it won't be perfect this year. I think we'll continue to have challenges related to it, but the communication lines are open, and I think it's a mutual respect.
I have a couple of comments before we proceed to the vote. First of all, we've had a very innovative conversation tonight and had lots of different ideas, and I think that is always part of the budget process. When and if we pass this budget tonight, be writing those ideas down for next year's budget, because that you don't just need to be asked. You need to have those at the ready when we plan for the budget. Secondly, I want to acknowledge that Mr. Mitchell has been championing for this idea to remove the teachers out of county tuition for years. This is something that he's had a lot of passion about. So, Mr. Mitchell, you haven't spoken about it tonight, but I know that you have thought about this a lot through the years, so it'll be interesting to see your comments. And if we do discuss some other ideas at a work session, again, what I would expect is that our board would come not just with information related to the ideas we've discussed here tonight, but also about other ideas. Because if you'll recall at the work session, we did discuss the possibility of adding additional counselors at the high school level. So we do kind of have that precedent of talking not just about the budget, but about other items that we would like to see in the budget as well. And again, just acknowledging that, this is a team sport with our team, but also with the county commission and also with the legislature and also with the public. And if there's one thing that's true about being on a board is, the Rolling Stones song, you can't always get what you want. I don't know that if you try sometime you'll find everything you need, but it is a process, and we do work throughout the year with all the other legislative bodies. So appreciate everyone's work, and I don't see anybody else wanting to discuss the budget. So with that, board members, please cast your votes in favor or not in favor of the general purpose school fund.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, board members. The next item on our agenda is the Central Cafeteria Fund. Do we have a motion to approve? Mr. Mitchell makes the motion. Mr. Hall makes the second. Board members, is there any discussion? Mr. Galbraith.
Thank you. Jason, did I see that I don't know if it's final yet, but I thought I saw that there was an intention or maybe lack of funding to fund the USDA's food purchase for next year, for next school year?
I don't have any answer to that. I'm going to look over to Mark Samuels and see if he's heard anything. Mr. Samuels?
No, sir, we don't have anything firm one way or the other. The current legislation, as I understand it, goes through the end of June. So no word one way or the other, no indication of what the reimbursement rate would be, whether it continued on as is or reverted back.
If I may, to make sure we have some clarity on where we are, the USDA is fully reimbursing all schools for every lunch that is served right now, every school lunch that is served right now. That started with the President Trump administration. It continued into the Biden administration. We don't have any indication yet for next year. We know that if it changes, we are going to have a significant transitional period. Figuring out how much parent habits have changed, student habits have changed with it actually choosing the school lunch and deciding to pay for it versus where we were a year and a half ago. We have a la carte sales that we've continued to provide, and we actually don't have in this particular budget a recommendation for any changes to the charges, in part because right now there's no charge because USDA is reimbursing. If in fact the federal government does not in this coming fiscal year, come August, fund or they make a change, we're going to have to do some work ourselves with James Remitty's office to see what the market looks like at that point, because we know that there's been pretty significant fluctuation with a rising trend. I'm throwing my pen around with a thank you, with a rising trend of food cost.
So I guess, is there a way to approve this budget? I mean, it seems like what you just said, we're under the assumption right now in this budget that the USDA is going to pay for the meals, right?
Mark, if you would speak to that.
We're not sure. Okay, so it's very hard for us to project one way or the other. What we're showing here is what we think food costs are going to be, which, with some of the current events, it's going to be higher. We're projecting some equipment costs that we need to do because we haven't done it recently. We would have to project what we think the participation would be on the meals if we went back to the old way versus what it is now. So things that we're going to have to see on how it works out in the August, September, October timeframe will tell at that point. So.
And Mr. Galbraith, I mentioned in my comments during the superintendent's report that in the 16 years, it's the most proposed, pay increases we've had for our faculty and staff. In my 16 years, this is the most unpredictable food service budget.
Well, I completely agree with that. I guess I'm not comfortable with the price increase. I mean, that we're having to budget. I mean, I applaud you for. I mean, it's a 50% increase in food costs, and I think that may very well happen. But I guess if we don't increase our cost, and we don't know how elastic this cost is with demand, right? So if we increase our cost by 50% and we have 50% fewer people that are buying lunches, then we're also not going to be able to meet our costs. And the fact that this needs to be self-sustaining, I really just don't feel like we have enough information right now to create a budget that I feel comfortable with. So I'm not sure where that leaves us.
Well, thank you for that. There are always variables in the budget. Our budget includes what we know now, knowing that we do have the capacity to make budget amendments if the need arises. So because of our schedules, because of our timing, because of our need to present a budget, we do work off the information we have and the projections as best we have right now. And, you know, if we find out earlier than the school year and we need to make a change, we'll bring that to you. But with the information we have right now, we've concluded that this is an appropriate proposed budget.
Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Samuels, you'd said that that the federal government is funding our school lunches, I guess, and breakfast as well, through the end of June. That you believe that's when that current.
It's the current fiscal year.
Okay, and so we really won't have to cross the bridge of figuring out the cost of our school lunches without the federal funding until next school year, which I guess if they're not going to renew that, then we'll have a few months in the summer to kind of get an idea and make some adjustments if we need to. The other question I have is, what is our situation for meals in our summer program that both, I guess, that is voluntary as well as state mandated?
With the current going through the end of June, which is in the end of our summer camp program, the existing rules apply. So the breakfasts and the lunches and snacks through the summer camp program should be the same as last summer.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Cleveland?
Just to make it clear, we're talking about the bill that is going through right now, the House bill? Because there is, right now, House Bill 1744, and it's regarding the school lunches, free lunches that are going to be reimbursed. It is now, as of 3/16, it was placed on the subcommittee calendar, K through 12 subcommittee for 3/22, so it is moving forward. That's House Bill 1744. So it is moving forward.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Cleveland. Mr. Brown?
Thank you. It's really a point of clarification. So this is federal money, right, not state money?
We receive no county money or state money. If I'm not mistaken, Mark, nod your head. It is federal funding and revenue from actual consumers.
So
Have I got that right, Mark, just to make sure?
Yes, sir. In some regards, here in the last 2 years, the state has administered some of the federal allotments that have come down, but this USDA is federal funds.
So there are occasional pass-throughs the state, but it's ultimately federal funding and our actual customers.
So is it money that actually sits in the state budget, or is it just passed through the Department of Education or
It is
Department of
not, it is
Agriculture?
not in the state budget.
So the reason I ask that question is the federal fiscal year runs October 1 through September 30. And so I'm wondering if the funding is in the federal budget for the current federal fiscal year, then presumably that would mean we're getting those funds until September 30. So it would be funded for a portion of the coming school year. But the question is, if it got cut off, it would be cut off October 1, not July 1.
It was by school year, as I recall, the last 2 years. So you're absolutely correct. The federal fiscal year goes to the end of September, but the school year went through the end of June.
So these USA decisions up to this point, looking back, when this program started, they gave a shorter window and said, we're going to fund it through blank day, and then they extended it. If I'm not mistaken, there have been 2 extensions from the original.
Okay.
There's just not been an announcement about anything yet beyond the end of this school year.
So the federal fiscal year dates have no bearing on any of this? Okay.
I don't know. It might from a budgeting perspective for them. I just don't know.
You're correct. What we have had is because of COVID. And so what they've taken into consideration is the school year for not their fiscal budget year.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Cleveland?
Just for clarification, I'll read the rest of it, and that may answer your question. It says, okay, under the board's jurisdiction, so each student under the board's jurisdiction, and it said requires the state to reimburse each LAA the cost of providing a free breakfast and lunch to each student enrolled in the LA after all available federal funds have been applied.
Mr. Hall?
Thank you, Chair. So, Jason, as you pointed out in the meeting, the work session, that no district in the country has collected free and reduced lunch information for the past 2 years. So that we would all, every school district in the country would be faced with the challenge to do this suddenly.
Well, I don't know if any particular district had sent something out
Okay.
asking their families, but our experience has been, there's been no productivity in asking someone to apply for free or reduced
Sure.
lunch because everyone's free.
So
So yes, nationally, every student who's choosing a lunch is getting it without charge.
Okay. And so to Mr. Galbraith's concern, we could find ourselves having to come up with something if this suddenly stops. But in the meantime, we do need to pass a budget based on the best information we have.
That's right.
Correct? Like, if there were only 5 votes in favor of this, what would happen?
It would fail, and we would have some discussions with you about where we go from here with the budget. There are a lot of USDA requirements related to budget. I'm going to look over to Ms. Farmer and Mr. Samuels to see if there's anything else you can add to that.
You're on.
I would just comment, part of our communications plan for the summer goes directly to Mr. Hawes' point about free and reduced folks. They need to potentially prepare for needing to have done those filings, which they haven't done in the last 2 years. So that would be part of our communications plan this summer, depending upon what the USDA decision is.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Ms. Farmer?
One other thing to keep in mind is they do, when you look at their projections, they have a substantial fund balance as well. Even though revenue is less than the expenditures, they're still left with $3.8 million in fund balance. So that gives us a little bit of time to make those adjustments. It's not coming in August 1st with we're under, behind the ball. We do have some time and that money to work with.
This may be an overstatement, but historically, because our free and reduced numbers have been less than many of our neighbors, it's a tighter budget than many of our neighbors. So we've actually had a more significant adjustment with this new model than lots of other places.
I see no further questions. Board members, please cast your votes.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, board members. Our next item is the Extended School Program Fund. Do I have a motion to approve? Ms. Apria makes the motion to approve. Mr. Welch makes the second. Board members, any discussion? I see no one requesting discussion. Please cast your votes.
Recommend approval.
Thank you.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Okay. And our next item is capital requests. Mr. Golden, do you want to say anything about this item?
Well, I'll give you the basics of it. Annually, we have major capital requests that come to the board and come to the commission through this voting process. This typically is 3 main areas: maintenance, technology, and safety issues that tend to be of a recurring or repair nature rather than new projects. So we do recommend approval of this particular budget.
We have a motion to approve. Mr. Cash makes the motion. Mr. Mitchell makes the second. Board members, any discussion? Mr. Galbraith?
Jason, can you can you remind us how much of capital is included in the general purpose budget as well?
I may have to refer to Ms. Farmer or Mr. Samuels for items related to this, but I can speak to it generally. Our maintenance department does have budgeting for materials, supplies, and some small projects related to that in the ops, what we call the ops budget, the operational budget, which was the first budget you voted on. If we have a project that we know needs to be done, that's not one of those anticipated regular maintenance issues, it will show up in this budget. Floors, replacement of HVAC systems, things like, the playground references that you see in there, some other safety functions. But if it's a regular replacement item, it's going to be in the operational budget. Mr. Samuels, Ms. Farmer, any other detail?
Yes, sir. The bulk of the capital technically is in the capital fund because of the threshold that defines a capital project, which is $10,000. So the ops side of the house is for primarily the day-to-day things, the safety aspects that we go through, the contracts that we need to provide the level of service contracts, fire alarms, sprinkler systems, those kind of things, and the stuff that we need on a day-to-day basis. On the IT side of the house, Tim has a rather, I was going to say robust, it's probably not a good term to use, for spare parts for the broad spectrum of IT items that we have. That's in the operational side. On the capital side, we're looking at replacement and renewal, including the Chromebooks that we've done. And there's some other furniture aspects that are in the capital side. Safety and security things are included within both the maintenance piece and the IT piece, and they've been segregated appropriately based on the technical requirements of those individual projects.
And I guess an additional question, I don't remember us talking about this, and I just looked, did we really only spend $3.8 million on computers last year? I thought we would have spent quite a bit more than that or maybe that was the year before, maybe it was the COVID year that we had to spend such a big amount on getting the one-to-one.
The Chromebooks was part of operational funds, not necessarily the capital side, but we did take some capital money previously on the first round to actually pay for that, which are things that we had to delay a year. So, no, sir, there was more than that overall. Tim, if I'm misspeaking, let me know, but there was a good operational budget line item for the Chromebooks, and there still is.
And let me add to that, we actually did a lease purchase agreement for the bulk of those, which actually was treated as an operational expense.
Okay,
rather than
that was, I think that's where I was really going as far as some of these capital costs that don't show up here, which is fine. I just want to make sure that that we know that those exist. But so this largely doesn't include Chromebooks then, if our Chromebooks are going to be are being purchased as an operating expense.
Yes, sir. Correct.
Okay, and then so what's the cost to, with outside the cost of growth to buy additional Chromebooks? What's the cost to refresh those is it a 5-year cycle, 4-year cycle? How does that work?
Well, we got a 4-year lease, and we're at $3-something million a year as part of that lease payment.
Okay. So the amount would go up incrementally for growth, but presumably in year 5, then that's just going to be a continued operating expense.
Assuming that the mechanism would still be in place and it would make fiscal sense
Right.
to do it, yes.
Instead of buying,
That's
instead
right.
of purchasing them.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
Board members, any other questions or discussion? Mr. Golden, did you communicate a staff
I
recommendation?
recommend approval.
Okay. Board members, please cast your votes.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, board members. The next item is board policies for first and final reading. And Ms. Osbrooks, would you please explain the context of the first and final reading?
Sure, board members, per our board policy, we have a mechanism that for editorial changes, the policies can be a first and final reading. Staff's recommendation of both of the following policies be a first and final reading, and they would go into effect after your vote tonight if you pass.
Thank you, board members. The first item is policy 1.102, board members' legal status. Do we have a motion to approve? Ms. Cleveland makes the motion and Mr. Haw makes the second. Board members, any discussion? Mr. Haw?
Thank you, Chair. I'd move to waive the second reading of this policy and approve the policy on first and final reading.
Thank you. Mr. Cash?
I was just, I've got a request in to review this whole policy, excuse me, this whole policy, I believe in April. This will not change any of that, correct?
So, Mr. Cash, that's the next policy, 4.401, and yes, sir, that will not, your request has been noted and will be on the April agenda. When we get to 4.401, textbook selection and adoption, the recommended change tonight would not make a difference in moving forward next month.
Right. I've also got a request in for the textbook selection.
Yes, sir, that's the policy
Okay.
I just referenced.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, just want to make sure on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cash. Board members, any further discussion on policy 1.102, board members' legal status? Staff recommendation?
Recommend approval of this motion that would eliminate the nonpartisan basis reference in the board member legal status policy.
Thank you, board members. Please cast your votes.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Our next item, first and final reading, is policy 4.401, textbook selection and adoption. Do we have a motion to approve? Mr. Hall makes the motion. Mr. Welch makes the second. Board members, any discussion? Yes, Mr. Hall.
Chair, I would also move to waive the second reading of this policy and pass the policy on first and final reading.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Any other discussion? Mr. Brown?
Just a request for an explanation of what we're doing so that it's clear to not only us, but the public who's inquired today, some of whom have inquired today about this. I just wanted to be clear what we're doing and what we're not doing.
Thank you, Mr. Brown, and I'll speak to it, and then if Ms. Osbrooks needs any clarification of my statement. This proposed change is to make sure that this particular policy is in line with state law. And it's a change to the first paragraph, and Mr. King, if you would, pull that up, or the blue line is the language bringing this policy in compliance with the existing state law related to the textbook selection process.
If I can, that is correct, and the first sentence that is blacked, lined through, you will see is now begins on line number 5. So there is not a change as to textbook selection review committees. That has been in policy, that will continue to remain in policy.
This is an editorial change to make it consistent with state law. And again, to Mr. Cash's comments, this does not prohibit other changes that might be consistent with state law that could happen at some point in the future.
Mr. Brown, anything else?
No.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for that clarification. Mr. Mitchell?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Point of order here. Mr. Haw has, for the last two policies here, made a motion to pass this on a single reading and waive it for the second reading, so I'm a little confused on that process. If he's having to make a motion to waive the second reading, shouldn't we have had a vote to approve that or not?
No, sir. Just to clarify, there was a motion to approve made by Mr. Hall. In addition to approval, he is in his motion stating that it be a first and final reading per our board policy. Same with this one.
So the motion to place this on the floor included a motion
To approve.
to bypass the second reading, is
Yes,
what you're
sir.
telling me?
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Cash?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Elliot Mitchell asked my question, why we were going to bypass the second reading, but there's no second reading required on this, correct? Okay.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you.
Board members, any other questions? Staff recommendation?
Recommend approval.
Board members, please cast your votes.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Okay. Our next item is approval of special course application, and this is an annual agenda item.
Thank you. Oh,
Sorry. Mr. Golden, this is a little bit unclear. Can you please explain before we move to making
Sure,
motions?
thank you, Madam Chair. Each year, we put on the board agenda the potential for special courses and new courses proposed. We do have some this year. The first item is the special courses, which is at the bottom of the memo from Dr. Allen. We are recommending that you approve pre-AP Ancient History, which is not on the state list, but does have a College Board structure that we've included in the board packet. If I'm not mistaken, we intend to have 2 schools, maybe 3, based on student interest, have this class available for them this coming year. And so we do recommend approval of this request for pre-AP Ancient History so that we could submit this request to the state.
Board members, Mr. Wembley, you make the motion to approve? Is there a second? Ms. Apria makes the second. Board members, is there any discussion? I see no request for discussion. Board members, please cast your votes.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, board members. Our final agenda item for tonight is approval of high school courses, and this is also an annual agenda item. And Mr. Golden, I'm going to ask you for an explanation of this one as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. These 3 proposed courses are actually on the state list that we actually need to take to you for approval before we place this, each course as an available course in WCS. Again, these are particular courses: Agricultural Business and Finance, Pre-Law 2 Honors, and Introduction to Entrepreneurship, that we believe we have student interest and teacher availability. And so we are making a recommendation that you approve these 3 courses for new courses for Williamson County Schools next year.
Anyone make the motion? Mr. Cash makes the motion, and Ms. Apria makes the second. Board members, any discussion? Mr. Galbraith?
Jason, we actually had a question from a constituent this week regarding why we have different courses of study in different schools. You just spoke to it a little bit, but I think it's relevant here because not all these classes are going to be offered everywhere. In addition to where we find a lot of our differences is on the CTE side. Can you just speak to, I think you talked about availability and interest, but, and how we customize that based on school?
Thank you for that. We create programs that are driven by student interest, and then second, our ability to staff for it. We do not have enough interest in every imaginable college and career technical education program to be able to offer that at every school. There just aren't that many students taking a particular course. So each school has a number of CCTE courses based on student interest. One example on one side of the spectrum is what Carol Bertong actually mentioned in some of her celebrations, what we call the TV courses. And she actually has a more professional phraseology than me, but I use it. It's a broadcast journalism course, and we have large interest in there to the point where 9 of our 10 high schools have that. There are others where agriculture, for example, might just have 1 or historically 2 schools that have enough interest for it. So every CCT course is driven by student interest. It's an elective, but also students do need to have an elective focus to graduate, which is 3 credit hours of a particular program of concentration. These CCTE courses do often and usually do offer the graduation program for that. Knowing that we don't have enough student interest for every single program at every single school, our zoning policy allows students to attend a school out of zone if they have a particular interest in a particular course of study that's not offered at their school. And so I used agricultural education as an example. That is a common one where somebody might choose to attend, for example, Page High School out of zone, and if they have that interest.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Board members, please cast your votes.
Your vote is 11 yes, 0 no.
Thank you, board members. That concludes our meeting for tonight. This meeting is adjourned, and happy spring.